Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are going to introduce today a new lesson, seniors. It's about an author that's still living until our current time, and she made a very bestseller novel known as The Glass Castle. The author is about 59 years old, and she wrote this book as an authentic and realistic reflection of her past life, of her childhood, and we're gonna reflect many aspects about it after that, of course. Now, of course, the title is like when you say Glass Castle. Just looking at the title at the beginning and trying to uncover the symbolic element that's found, that's, glass castle, or a house that's made from glass can be easily shattered and broken. And this is related to many facts that we're going to refer precisely in the main objectives that are stated in the lesson, which is uncovering and trying to go into more detailed clarification about the relation between the author and her mother and the character description of her mother. What can be shattered simply is the relation between a mother and her children, father and his children, the house, the family. Is it still together? Are they still living together, or they are separated? So this castle is supposedly going to be the family house. Once it's shattered, everything is broken, and every member of the family will go to a different location. This is only, I'm talking symbolic-wise, before starting the lesson. And of course, let's have a little bit background about the author, and the way in her life, and how she started her life, and how she started struggling in her childhood. Now, of course, Jeanette was simply living in a constant, unstable, childish condition. Her family constantly moved from one place to another. They used to live in trailers at that time. In her childhood, in this part, she referred to different destinations, like when they were in Arizona, and later on they shifted to many places until she settled with her brother and two sisters later on in New York. After that, of course, when she became an author and a journalist, writer. But she lived in a very difficult condition, financial condition. Her parents were so poor. Her father was simply an electrician who was having precise and specified wages, so he couldn't afford his family to that level. Her mother was a casual domestic housewife. We're going to talk about all this detail, but we're going to reflect about such conditions in a family, because when we're going to uncover the elements in the story and the relation between Jeanette and her mother and the character description of her mother, we're going to have to look about basic things that the author missed in her childhood, which is stability, since they are constantly moving from one place to another, quality and safety. She's exposed to a lot of things that are considered dangerous, but there's something about her parents, it's considered by many critics like childish or irresponsible, that they allowed her to take certain responsibilities in a very in an early time, which is considered like one of the terms of child child abuse and child lack of care, and all of that safety measures, precautions. The author was not living in such kind of conditions. Affordability. Her father, of course, as I said, was suffering from financial problems. That's why he couldn't afford providing a stable life for his family and all that. There was no health care, no proper sanitation, dirtiness and squalor spread everywhere, where parents used to live in such kind of wretched condition. Talking about her past, we're going to refer later on to the text. Go to the text right now. I'm going to ask all of you to just listen very well. So we're going to focus about main objectives to reflect the character description of her mother and how it was depicted in the story and all. Now, Glass Castle, the woman on the street. This is part, of course, this is only an excerpt. It's a selection from her book. Of course, it took a Pulitzer Prize, and it was nominated by several magazines, especially New York Times considered this as one of the most successful novels. About an estimation of about 15 million copies were sold at that time, and this book was so much famous because of its realistic depiction of the non-fiction elements in the author's life. And we're going to refer to a lot of elements once we're going to start this. So Jeanette was, we're going to refer to a part, the woman on the street. Now, I was sitting in a taxi wondering if I had overdressed. So we have first person perspective. We know this is a memoir, and that's why the author is reflecting her own perspective and going inside a personal depictions of her memory. This is part of her memory, recollections of her old kind of life, of her childhood, of everything that happened. So that's why I want to put in consideration, seniors, that the basic element that we are going to discuss here was the use of sensory detail, vivid imagery that's used here to depict her mother and the situation, the setting, and all that stuff at that time. I was sitting in a taxi wondering if I had overdressed for the evening when I looked out the window and saw Mom rolling through a dumpster. Of course, now she saw her mother, but she was sitting. When you look at a woman on the street, let's look at the title itself. It seems like if you want to write about your own mother, you're going to seem somehow indifferent to her if you're going to say the word woman. Why won't you just mention the name or mention the word mother? So even the word itself, and I will discuss the castle, the symbolic element of the glass castle, and we're going to discuss the meaning of the word itself. When you say the word woman, this word conceals a cold relation and an indifference from the author, and a kind of distant approach to how she kind of addressing her mother by saying a woman, as if she doesn't know her. And this also reflects a lot, and it implies a lot of elements in the text itself on how she was having, how she was trying to hide the fact about her parents and what happened, and the fact about the financial condition and the social status of her parents. I was sitting in a taxi wondering if I had overdressed for the evening when I looked out the window and saw mother, rooting through a dumpster. Okay, now you're going to ask yourself, she's passing by the street, her mother was rooting through a dumpster. Of course, if you can ask yourself about this behavior of someone who go into the squalors and rooting through dumpsters, we're talking about homeless people. So we're going to, from the first part of this text, we can have an inference about the financial status of the author's family at that time, and we're going to wonder about her role in helping them. And that's why I'm asking you not to overjudge the author and wait until you reach you reach different parts in the story. When you read other parts, and even you can buy the book after that, or you can read it online. It was just after dark. Now we have a description of the setting where this precise occasion happened, when she met her mother, when she was passing by the taxi. We have visual details after dark, blustery marsh wind. So we now have an idea about the time. And the word bluster means windy wind of marsh with the steam coming out of the manholes. You know the manholes, you know the ground covers on the ground when the steam comes up. And I had this, I guess, in one. This is the manhole, and this is how steam can come up underground steam, of course. Now, steam coming out of the manhole. So we have visual details, descriptive details of the setting and the location where she was passing by, what she was recollecting the time when she was passing by and meeting her mother accidentally. And people hurried along the sidewalks with their collars turned up. Why turned up? Because the wind. Of course, this is a common reflex when it's windy day. You turn your collar up and try to move on. I was stuck in traffic 2 blocks from party where I was heading. She's also now giving us further details about the setting and about where she was heading and what she was doing. Mom stood 15 feet away, so her mother was there, close to a dumpster, trying to root through the trash can, all that stuff. She had tied rags around her shoulders. Fine. Let's now discuss a little element here. I was stuck in traffic 2 blocks from the party where I was heading. Okay, you ask a question as a reader now. The author is going to a party where her mother is rooting through a dumpster. This reflects what? The social class barrier, class distinction between the fact that, and a total indifference, the author, that she was passing by, going to a party where her mother is rooting from a dumpster. So we see now this dysfunctional, distant, and complicated relation with the conception about her parents and her real identity, and how she was trying to conceal this or confront it in a way or another. Mom stood 15 feet away. She had tied rags around her shoulders. Now, rags, we're talking about here now, if we can discuss this visual detail, we're talking about a mother who's living in a wretched financial condition. She's simply searching the squatters, fine, rooting for anything she can find, and from the way on what she was wearing, we can reflect that she was in a homeless condition, and the author is somehow indifferent, and since she was riding the cab and going to a different destination, she was in distant relation with her parents, and she was moving. She was not caring or not trying to approach her mother and do something about that. She had tied rags around her shoulders to keep out the spring chill, of course, because it was cold, and was picking through the trash. So she was, squattering in the trash, while her dog, a black and white terrier kind of dogs, mixed, played at her feet, of course. All this visual detail. Mom's gestures were all familiar. The way she tilted, so we have facial description of her mother to know more about her mother from this precise text. The way she tilted her head, the way how she bent her head a little bit toward the trash and thrust out her lower lip, fine, when studying items of potential value. So this is exactly the same facial features of homeless people who start searching in a dumpster for valuable things that they can, for example, old things that or overused things they can use or eat or get use of. Potential value that she hoisted out of the dumpster. Fine, the way her eyes widened with childish glee when she found something she liked. The way her eyes were what? Widened, yani its expression of happiness and relief, or shock and positive shock because she found something in the dumpster. This is also another description that reflects the wretched financial condition and the impoverished status that the author's family were living in, and precisely when she was looking at her mother in that kind of condition. With childish glee, childish happiness. She's looking, when she found something she liked, she would pick it and take it. Now more description, her long hair, descriptive detail, we have visual details. Her long hair was streaked when it was colored with gray and it was tangled and matted. And her eyes had sunk, so we can have streak with the gray and tangled. So from the facial feature and from the descriptive details about her mother, we know that tangled hair, all that. Her mother wasn't like, having a proper healthy, was not in a proper healthy condition. No self-hygiene, fine, and tangled hair reflects like she's lack of self-care, and this is common among such people, homeless people who do not care about how they look because they are craving and scavenging from any kind of location in order to keep their survival. And her eyes had sunk deep into their sockets, sockets inside the dumpster, but still she reminded me into their sockets. Of course, now the sockets, who the cavity inside her eye, it's called also sockets, but still she reminded me of the mom she'd been when I was a kid, of course. It reminded me, so we have now foreshadowing. It's all about foreshadowing, but here she's going back to a distant time in the past. Fine, this is like when she was facing her dumpster. Now we're going to move back, but still reminded me of the mom she'd been when I was a kid. Fine, when she was a kid. Swan diving off cliffs and painting in the desert. Of course, swan diving off cliffs and painting in the desert and reading Shakespeare aloud. Of course, the first thing that you can acquire from this is like the social and financial distinction. Here, she's speaking from a dumpster, which is the present where the author faced her while she was passing by the car. And here she was swan diving, fine, swan diving off cliff, and she was painting in the desert, fine, and reading Shakespeare. Of course, now this reflects that her condition here is more refined than the previous condition. So the status of her family in the past was somehow better than and precisely her mother was better than the status in the present. Of course, now swan diving off cliffs and painting in the desert and reading Shakespeare aloud. Her cheekbones were still high and strong, of course. Now, what do we have? Her cheekbones were still high and strong. This reflects the past. The word still signifies also the time difference. In the past, unlike the present, gray, the present, as we said before, gray, tangled, matted, but the present, still, which means the past, she was in a better condition and she was in her youth, still, fine, no wrinkles and all that stuff, and strong. But the skin was parched and ruddy from, now we see the word how it was parched and ruddy. This also, women in such kind of, especially that her parents' trailer was, they were living in among other trailers in the desert of Arizona. In such kind of dry conditions, they get some lotions in order, like, those women who can buy such kind of lotion. But since her parents in the past were living in a terrible financial condition, because her father was, a mere electrician who can barely affording to buy them food and let them living in this trailer, people who's suffering from such kind of financial condition couldn't buy such kind of lotions in order to take care of their skin. So that's why skin was parched and ruddy. And this red color is coming from the winters and summers exposed to this element with no self-care. Okay, to the people walking by, we go back to the present. Fine. We go to the present now, where she met her on the street. To the people walking by, she probably looked like any of the thousands of homeless. So this was, she was in a homeless condition, people in New York City. It had been months since I laid eyes on Mom. So it's this very important fact about the distant detachment between the author and her family. And we ask a lot of questions. Of course, what comes to your mind right now about the cold-hearted author, that she was approaching her mom instead of going out of the car and helping her and doing this Confucian filial piety, taking care of her mother, trying to help her, she's not doing. And also I'm going to ask the readers of this selection, if you like this selection, to wait for the other selection and all to get the book, to have more idea about the author's perspective. Maybe, and I'm not judging the author, but maybe you can understand the author's perspective. So it had been months since I had eyes on mom, which means like the strong distance and the detachment, fine, and the distant relation between the author and her family, and precisely her mother. And when she looked up, I was overcome with panic that she'd see me. Okay, fine. She doesn't want her to see. She doesn't want her to be seen. This reflects she's feeling ashamed. Here the author is ashamed. She doesn't want her mom to see. That's why she was panic. Okay, she was feeling source of embarrassment. Call out my name. And that someone on the way to the same party would spot us. So, feeling embarrassment from her own social status. So we do understand that the author now is in a different social status, a refined social status, especially that she's living in Park Avenue, as we know now later on, unlike her mother who's searching in the squatters and who was living in a homeless condition in the suburbs of New York. We understand the distant and the dysfunctional and the complicated relation, and you know, you can call it as you want, but we have a complete complex situations going on between the mother and the author, and her perspective about her mother and how she was considering her. Fine, whether you consider the author as loyal to her parents or not, this is something else. I just want to look at the text to judge it in that way in order to understand the character of the author's mother, whose name is Rose. Fine, Rose Wells, and to understand more the reason for the author's approach in that cold and a different way toward her mother, and her feeling of embarrassment, especially when she passed by and she didn't try to go and help her mom, when she's trying to hide herself. Same party would spot together, and mom would introduce herself, and my secret would be out. Fine, very good. So you can ask me this question. If you are in the class, seniors, you would ask this question, you have to notice it. Mr., if this is a secret, why she's writing a story about it? Why she's exposing herself? If this story is real, how can the story, if the author is really so much protective about her parents and about her fact, how come she published this book and she exposed herself to the world? Simply because of what I'm going to tell you right now. You know, the author started writing newspaper headings in New York Times when she went to New York. And one time she was writing a lot of articles about Scientologists. And that's why the authorities asked for more investigation about her past and family, and they informed her about they are going to start an investigation about her family to figure out why she's writing kind of Scientologist topics. And this is when the author felt like it's now the right time to start writing a book about her childhood, to expose her childhood, because after all, eventually she's going to be exposed, and since before the action is going to be starting from the authorities, she started to publish this book, to write her memoir, and to defend herself, maybe, if you can read the whole book, and reflect her demented, and I'm going to say the word demented, inconsistent, unstable childhood, and we're going to understand the reason for writing this book, and the elements that were so much practical and authentic and realistic that she tried to uncover in this story. The same party would spot us together. She's feeling embarrassed. Mom would introduce her as my secret about, like, she's my mom and I want everybody to know about this, to be exposed. I slid down. This we have here. We have body language that also reflects her attempt to conceal her identity, and of course uncovers the feeling of embarrassment about being exposed to her mom in the street, where someone else would see her and say that if that's your mom. In the seat, and ask the driver to turn around and take home to Park Avenue. This is where she lived, which is a different condition, of course, different social status, different neighborhood than condition where her mom was living. So based on the details, how would you describe the author's mother? rough, living a rough life, poor, wretched, homeless. Okay, she's suffering from her terrible financial condition. She's squattering from the garbage, and she's lacking healthcare. There's no good sanitation or hygiene, or she's not living a refined life. This is precisely what can we see from we observe from the text. How does the author feel about her? Of course, there's a distant detachment. There's a big indifference. That's also an embarrassment about exposing herself to her mom, and she's also we have this kind of ambivalent emotion, mixed up emotions to her mother in a way, and how she can approach her, or to especially what did I say ambivalent? Because when she started her flashback and nostalgia to the past about how her mother looked like when she was painting, this is a good memory. So that's why we have ambivalent, mixed up emotion between the past and the present, her feeling of embarrassment, and how she was trying to conceal her identity, and why she wants to keep this as a secret from everybody. How would you describe their relation? Cold, distant, dysfunctional, complicated. We can describe it in all that way, especially that the way and how she was reflecting in this text. Of course, now talking about memoir and narrative, of course, we have to put in consideration to allow this part that the author is simply considered as a round character. Jeanette Rose is considered in her memoir as a round. You can say dynamic character, or another word we can say also complex character, because complex characters or dynamic characters are going to show in a certain level development, state of development and change throughout the part of the story. But since we are addressing here only a selection, I'm going to wait for another selection, the other selection later on, inshallah, we're going to cover it after that, to talk about the transition that happened in the author's personality and her moments of weakness and strength and all that stuff. Especially that her mother was not approached totally in the book. That's why it's considered unlike her father. Most of her writings, because she was a closer relation with her father, was about her father. But here we are talking about only this kind of description. Her mother was considered as a flat character because in her real life she didn't play an important role in her life. She considered her mother also as she favored her paintings and art life, and she considered her children, this is based on the author herself, she considered her children as a barrier that prevented her from fulfilling her dream about becoming a painter. And that's why we don't have a fulfilling mother duty. If look, we're going to refer to this later on in the other text, so I won't go before other stuff and all that stuff. Now, here we have noticed the author's description of her mother in the excerpt. Even the title of the passage, A Woman on the Street, reveals the author's ambivalent, which is mixed emotions, complicated emotions toward her. What do the details tell us about her mother as a character? Of course, we have the first woman on the street, unremarkable, stranger. We know that later on, from the beginning of the text, it's her mother, but the word woman reflects also, we can write here, indifference. Why? She's indifferent to her mother. Of course, she's acting indifferently to her mother, and she wants to conceal her identity. She wants to be exposed. She had tied rags around her shoulders. Of course, this kind of reflects the hard and the harshness kind of life that her mother was living, and she also can reflect that she was living a tough life, and she was a woman with no self-hygiene, and she was in a homeless situation. I'm gonna invite you seniors to solve the rest of this. Maybe we can cover it together later on, but I wanted to try to answer this by yourself, and based on my dissertation and explanation, about the text, so we can carry on later on and cover it together in other lectures, inshallah. This is in short now for this lecture. I hope that everything is clear to you about this. I believe a good, realistic, non-fictional book is considered as non-fiction. It's one of the best books. Really, it's good to read and advise to read. Thank you very much. We're going to end our lecture right now, seniors. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.